Welcome to Module 6 of our Baseball5 webinar. In this module, we'll go through the most interesting tool of Baseball5, hitting. Hitting is what makes the discipline unique. And we'll see that the technique is not that different from baseball or softball, besides the fact that we don't use a bat. Here you can see two pictures. And in this example, you see we have used a right-handed hitter. In the first picture, a ball is tossed with the left hand, while in the second one, the ball is struck with the palm of the hand, curved, in order to follow the shape of the ball. You should take note of this tip, since it gives you more control and spin to the ball compared to a ball hit with the palm completely flat. In fact, if you think about a rubber ball that comes at you at 75 miles per hour, or even faster, you'll realize that when it bounces on the ground, and there's a lot of spin on the ball, it makes things much more difficult for the defense. However, as Baseball5 has continued to evolve, another technique has also been developed, and that's hitting the ball with a fist. Some say that through this method they feel that they can hit the ball harder. Everyone's different, and therefore only training and experience will tell you which technique will be most effective for you. However, just for your information, in Cuba, where this sport is played at a high level, everybody hits with the palm curved. And here you can see the proper sequence from 1 to 6. I'll describe this sequence and then we'll watch some video examples. But this proper sequence 1 to 6 is what we need to teach to young players. We'll start with picture 1. You start with both feet in the batter's box. You look at the position of the defense and decide where you want to hit the ball. In step 2, it's important that you take your first step in the direction of where you want to hit the ball. To clarify, you shouldn't take your first step to the first base side of the batter's box if you want to hit the ball to the third base side, and vice versa. If you do that, you could wind up twisted, which is actually very dangerous for your back. So make sure that the first step you take is in the direction that you want to hit the ball. Moving on to picture 3. You see in the example that the hitter is still looking at the defense while the left foot follows the right one. Now he's set in an athletic and balanced position with the ball in the left hand. Moving down to the bottom line, in picture 4, you're in the most important phase. You create the body load and the momentum towards first base. It's a crossover shuffle with the right foot behind the left one. Now you're completely focused on the ball. In step 5, you see that when the right foot steps down, the load of the body is over and the swing starts. The left foot follows with a long step at the same time as your right hand and elbow load. Your eyes are on the ball, which you toss slightly with the left hand. In picture 6, you see that as soon as the front foot steps down, close to the front of the box, the hip rotation starts. Using the coming power of the elbow, the hand, and the knee, you attack the ball and smash it hard in the direction previously decided. Now that's a lot of words to explain something that really takes a total of about 2 seconds. This entire 6-photo sequence takes just about 2 seconds. And we'll see that now in some videos. Here you'll see the proper sequence at full speed. And we're going to play it on a loop here for you to get a good look at it. In this example, the exit velocity of the ball is approximately 75 miles per hour. And now seeing it, hopefully you can understand how difficult it is playing defense if the other team has quality hitters, and why hitting makes such a big difference in the game. Now let's look at a baseball player, a softball player, and a Baseball5 player, there on the right, all in the act of hitting. We're going to focus on the differences and similarities between them. Besides the bat that the baseball and softball player have, what are the obvious differences? Pretty hard to find, aren't they? Basically, the only difference is the fact that the front foot is already open and the front leg is already flexed when you look at the Baseball5 player. Otherwise, you see all three with their bodies balanced, the front foot down, and the back foot up on the toe. They all have backside rotation from the hips to generate hitting speed. And finally, we invite you to notice the great body connection and the hand-eye coordination that all three players display. Now let's focus on the arm extension after contact. Same as in baseball and softball, once the hand smashes the ball in Baseball5, it follows through the ball. It's almost as if it pushes the ball to create more velocity and spin. There's no rollover. That's really all we wanted to show here. But now that we have underlined all the similarities and differences between baseball, softball, and Baseball5 swings, it's the right time to watch some videos and analyze some common mistakes that occur in Baseball5 hitting. In this first example, you're going to see some poor footwork in addition to the player hitting the ball too high so that the lower body doesn't work properly. And I'm going to play it now on a loop so you can have a look. You see that the footwork must be improved. There's no rhythm in the footwork starting the swing. The body is too high. There's no flex of the legs, and the ball is even hit too high. And it's kind of a short arm motion. There isn't any arm extension. In this second example, even though you can't see the player's legs, you can tell that there's really no good footwork going on. And this leads to the fact that the player doesn't really generate any power. He tosses the ball too high and way out in front of him, so when he makes contact with his arm is already extended. And I apologize that you can't see the young man's lower body, but you can tell that he's starting from a static position. He doesn't have the proper footwork to start the swing. And as a result, he really pushes the ball instead of hitting it. Good hand-eye coordination, though. And that's the last we'll see of that young man right there. This next video, you'll notice that, as with the previous videos, there's bad footwork and really no footwork to tell you about whatsoever. As you might have guessed, this is a pretty common issue for beginners, and so it needs to be trained early and often. The girl here is going to toss the ball over her head, almost as a volleyball style. And you see where the point of contact is up around her bill of her cap. She probably thinks that by throwing the ball high, this will give her more time to hit and more power too. But in fact, the opposite is true. The result is less power and a high bounce, which means an easier play for the defense. You see, she started up at the front of the batter's box, not all the way back, and that's why there's no footwork. Before we show you this next example, I just want to go back to that previous one and tell you that one of the best Baseball5 players who's had a chance to really get into the game is a former volleyball player, and she never hits the ball that high. In fact, the WBSC ran a test in Cuba, and it was proved that if you hit the ball over your head, you can't really use your hip rotation to increase the exit velocity. And if you look again at this girl, you see that as she's hitting the ball, she doesn't use her hips at all. That's just a side note. But now we'll move on to the next one. Again, In this example, we'll see that there's poor footwork since the player just walks into the hit and doesn't have any rhythm or power. On the contrary, he shouldn't walk into it. You should be flexing your legs and getting some push from your lower body. Further, his action is so slow that he has to toss the ball high in order to have enough time to load and hit. He does have decent extension, pretty good follow through. And even though the contact isn't bad, it's directed right at a fielder who you might even be able to see makes the catch on the fly. The ball didn't bounce. So again, it's not terrible, but poor footwork, no lower body action, and too high of a toss. One last time, and he's out. What you're going to see in this example is really the best footwork we've seen so far. However, at the point of contact, the body is still too high. The player is going to toss the ball high and then be forced to hit it way out in front of his body at shoulder height. As we saw in previous examples, this will result in a high bounce, low power, and no speed. And ultimately, that means an easy play for the defense. And you saw that high bounce to the defender. So pretty good footwork. He gets the lower half moving, gets the legs bent, but he's too rigid up high. And the toss is no good. The toss is too far out in front. And he has to hit the ball up high at shoulder height. But still, better than what we've seen. This example is one of the WBSC softball instructors. It's his first time playing Baseball 5. This is going to be a little different because the video doesn't loop, but we'll play it for you here. And I may be able to manually play it for you again. But maybe you saw some of the common mistakes we've seen already. Poor footwork, and as a result, poor body position resulting in low explosion. Also, like the previous example, he hits it at shoulder height. And yes, we can play it again. See how high he hit it? Up over his shoulders even. We'll do it one more time. Sorry, let's go back and look at that one more time. Very little action in the lower body, and as we can tell by now, that is really crucial to generating power for your hit. And in the next example, we're going to get a good look at that. And it's nobody better than a former MLB player to show you the way. This former MLB player is now a WBSC instructor. And in this example, he was trying to replicate a baseball swing. So he started from a standstill without the good footwork and the proper body load. But still, because of his baseball training, his body is flexed and balanced, and he hits the ball at the proper point of contact using the fist. We'll show you the video now. You see he's standing still, but has both legs bent and good hip rotation. However, without a bat and with no pre-existing velocity of the ball being pitched, even a strong former MLB player puts out a hit that doesn't have a whole lot of power, and it's an easy play for the defender to stop it. But still, when you take out the fact that he starts at a standstill, this is a very good starting point. And now that we've seen many examples, hopefully you begin to realize how the mechanics you use to hit can completely change the game. And we thank all of our WBSC instructors for letting us use their examples on video here. I really hope you enjoyed those videos, and maybe you can go back and watch them again so that when you're working with your young players, you can tell them what you've seen and how to improve it. And after having seen those common mistakes, now's the time to take a look at some drills that start building the foundation of a hitter. And we don't have videos for these first couple of drills, but they're very simple, so I'll explain them to you. In the first drill, a static hitting drill, partners start hitting without tossing the ball high from a standing position, like the MLB player you saw in the last video. So you could position two players across from each other, have them standing just like that MLB player. And here you should try to hit the ball straight to your partner. And if you remember the photo sequence we saw at the beginning of this presentation, those 6 stages of the swing, in this drill, the static hitting drill, we really only train frames 5 and 6, the hit itself. That's a good place to start. After about 15 or 20 repetitions of that static drill, we move into the second drill, where the coach will line up all the players on a line without a ball, and the coach calls out the entire sequence, frame by frame, from 1 to 6, and the players simulate the movement. So obviously the first step is showing your players the 6 photo sequence, and then try to get them to mimic that sequence on command without a ball. And as a coach, you should continue with this exercise until players memorize the sequence and become comfortable with it. When that happens, it's the right time to move to the next step. Now players are in pairs again, but this time, with the ball, they'll try the whole sequence at full speed. It's important to emphasize that in order to achieve good results, you need to spend a lot of time practicing hitting. And I've gone ahead and started the video here so you can see the players lined up for the full speed, full sequence drill. And coaches, it's important to remind your players that you really do need to spend a lot of time practicing, so players shouldn't panic at first. And as coaches, you don't have to yell at your players if they can't execute the proper mechanics immediately. It's not easy. The body must get comfortable with the movements through repetition. So I hope you can take in just how neat it is to see these players. And we can tell you that this is their very first Baseball 5 practice of their lives. And already they've progressed to the final drill to get comfortable with hitting. Can't stress enough how important this sequence is in getting your players to memorize it. But once they have, we'll move on to strategy. And this is a drill that's been developed to help players prepare for game situations. And it's pretty simple. It's a cone drill. Every sport has cone drills, and this is the Baseball 5 cone drill. The coach should set up cones on the gray part of the infield, which you can see labeled 1 through 6. Cone number 1 is down the third base line. Number 2, the gap between third base and short. Number 3 is the gap between the shortstop and the midfielder. Number 4, the gap between the midfielder and the second baseman. Number 5, the gap between the second baseman and the first baseman. And number 6, the 6th cone along the first base line. So you see that those cones are set up, and the players should be aiming for those cones because that's where the fielders are not. The famous baseball saying, hit it where they ain't. There's another level to this drill, and it's to keep your defenders active as your hitters get their practice. To keep the drill moving, the coach can place 6 defensive players right behind the cones and have 2 players hitting at a time. You see those stars on the yellow part of the outfield? That's where you can align your defenders, not the actual positions they'll be playing in a game, but for this drill. That way they're able to pick up the balls and throw them back to the 2 hitters so they get immediate repetition. After 3 to 4 minutes of this, maybe 10 to 12 hits for each player, you switch roles, you rotate so that another 2 players come in to practice hitting and the 2 that we're already hitting go out to one of those starred spaces and take a turn on defense. And with your team of 8 players at a practice, you can repeat this exercise until all 8 players have had their hitting practice. We hope you enjoyed this hitting tutorial and that you'll be able to use these drills to help train Baseball 5 hitters going forward. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to bringing you the next module.